Good evening. Special Saturday edition of W.A.R. We Are Resilient. I am Mike
W.A.R.
Yes. I'm Mike Gary of Hellfish Haven, here with Travis, host of Oscar Mike Radio with almost 500 episodes. Inching closer and closer each day. He's have you passed the 10-year mark, or are you just about the 10-year?
We're 9.5. We're officially 9.5 years.
Excellent. Just wild to think, we were doing the 400, episode just seemed like yesterday.
It goes by quick, man. It really does.
And today we're going to share some, information about the, current events going on and, how folks can, best, take the situation if it's, causing them any trouble or, triggering them in any way. You start with, let's see if I have the video here. All right, 1 second. Of course, I don't have it here. So we'll start with a different video. Since we're talking about post-traumatic growth in your year-end event, I figured it would be a good topic to to touch on and to go into for a few weeks at the beginning of the year here. And one of the big things that I said to start with was so even, small thing like, that just taking, 16 seconds of your time and being able to, hold your breath, release, hold, release, and, get yourself back grounded to where you are, can make a difference when, you're struggling. I know for me personally, I always like having one of these with me, a little grounding stone in the pocket, so that way I can put my thumb on it and be able to reach out and touch something. It helps me versus, it's either that or I'll fidget back and forth, or it's like if I can just hold something in my hand and, get the same, anxiety relief, then, to me, that's easier. And then I'm sure everyone has seen what is going on last night. The bombing of Venezuela and the capture. I don't know if it was coordinated or not, but some people are saying it was, some are saying it wasn't. But the president and first lady are on their way to New York to be, I guess, tried for whatever the government is going after them for. And that's why I feel like is the biggest confusion right now for me, Travis, is I'm even unsure of what they're being charged with.
Well, the charges were made out in 2020, so it's been 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
But there are charges that were validated by, I guess, an international court of crime. It was just a matter of getting him. And so if you don't have an extradition policy with the country, it's kind of hard. And he's not a nice guy. In the same vein of Manuel Noriega, is why we are where we are today. There is no secret. Tons of illegal drugs come from Venezuela. During the last administration, there were lots of Venezuelan gangs operating with impunity in the United States, and there was no motivation on the Venezuelan side to stop it. In fact, they were quite happy with it.
Yep.
My thing right off the bat is, I think for me is, okay, if it wasn't for oil, would we be doing this? I have to ask that question, right? And as
Hmm.
much as I'm happy about how this all went down, not one American life was lost. We have another thing closer to home with $9 billion going missing, money laundered, fraud, so on and so forth. I'd like to see the same kind of enthusiasm for this, for cleaning up our own house. So, I'm not sure, and then I'm like, if we've done regime change in the past. I mean, we have as a country, but this is the first time in my short time on this earth where we've just been so blunt about it. Yeah, we're changing the regime. Yeah, we're going to put in the people we want, and we're going to make sure this all works. And based on the president's speech today, the primary motivation seems to be oil.
Yep. It definitely seems like, it's tough because, we saw a lot of this, back in, 2001, following 9/11 and us going into Iraq. Even the same verbiage was used here with them starting to call, the drugs, weapons of mass destruction. And it was just, it seemed like the playbook was so similar and so, close to what was happening before, that it really, for a lot of us, Iraq veterans, it does hit home. And, we don't want to see the same mistakes that, that we endured and that we saw, our brothers and sisters in arms, get killed for. The, once we take over something and once we, remove a dictator, you know, are we owning the land or are we giving it to the next person that should be in charge? And that's where I feel they need to have a transition plan ready to go versus, you know, an occupying force and then, putting in place, temporary, and then it just turned into, the forever wars.
Yeah, absolutely. I it's got to be limited. It's got to be with the understanding that this is going back to the Venezuelan people. I certainly have no problem with, because again, people don't understand or they forget, which is just amazing. At one time, several major oil companies invested, billions into the oil infrastructure in Venezuela with the understanding that they were going to, take the oil out, Venezuela would get their cut, and they'd make their money. And then when Hugo Chavez came into power, he kicked everybody out and nationalized the oil industry, and so there have been companies who've had to eat this for decades now. And
Hmm.
again, let's not forget that Maduro was a bad guy. He had cocaine infrastructure set up in this country, excuse me. Caracas, one of the big cities in Venezuela, is very unsafe, and you know, kind of like Iran right now, they're having problems feeding, you know, taking care of their people, so on and so forth. And I know a Venezuelan, I met him through weightlifting, who, on one hand, is very happy that it seems like his country is in this state now compared to where it
Hmm.
was. He is extremely concerned about the fact that his son serves in the Venezuelan Marines and he hasn't been able to hear from him yet. And so, just right now, Mike, if I may, I'm going to say, hey, Gunther, um, we're just going to say, Almighty God, we hope that your son is okay and that you put your arms around Gunther's son. And, we let him know that, we are thinking of him here and that he's safe serving his country and you'll be able to be united with him soon. I just think it's important to say because, yeah, there's There's people in Venezuela right now who are probably dead because of those strikes. And while those strikes were, I mean, I don't know about you, Mikey, that was surgical. There was no more force used than necessary to affect this. And if you watch some of Nicolas Maduro's videos, he taunted the U.S. for years, like, you can't get me, you can't touch me, you're a coward. And
I do have the video that I wanted to pull up here, so I'm going to throw
okay,
this
yeah,
up
go
real
ahead.
quick.
¡Qué locura! Moscaí, ni explotaron allá, tú me estás explotando.
And with that, we just want to make sure that folks know that on both sides we want to make sure that all the Venezuelans are okay, and that all the people in the U.S. are well. Just because you have people that are in a country that their leader is doing something terrible doesn't mean that the local nationals themselves are terrible people. There were so many good people that we met in Iraq. There were so many people, a 7-year-old kid that saved my life over there. And they're not all the enemy is the biggest thing that that the US military does teach us, and to know the difference between enemy combatant and a local national, a civilian that's just caught in the battlefield. And it's tough when these strikes and the way they position bases, and they hide themselves within the community, and they shelter themselves with civilians, and just you hope for the best with that.
I'm again, one part of me is very impressed with this skill and precision and the coordination it took to pull this off. And then again, loss of life is minimized. I just didn't know we were into regime change, and I'm just really kind of glass half full because of all the problems we have here in our own country. And so I'm not sure what we gain by doing this at this time. Maybe it's just a naive way to look at it, but again, I'm really kind of, my problem, coming into this tonight, Mike, is, and you've heard this too. You've heard this more than probably me. There's just not enough money to take care of veterans here. That veteran needs a housing voucher. Sorry, can't get it for you. Oh, you can't walk, you can't really work. We can only give you like 30%. If we give you 50 or 70, oof, oof, we can only, we are patting ourselves on the back that we can give out a $1,400 tax abatement to a 100% disabled veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, we can't fund that school or that program that would allow a veteran to work during the day and have the school at nights or on weekends. Can't fund that program. There's just no money. And, and this thing in Minnesota just convinces me that the money is there. I don't know about you, Mike, but I'm wrapping my head around the fact that the money is there. If we have $9 billion, which the majority of that money came from the federal, tax system, and Minnesota had $9 billion to spend however they wanted to with no oversight. I don't want to hear how a veteran in need of housing, education, other kinds of things to support them if they've been injured or hurt, or their family support when the family is a care provider for that veteran. I don't want to hear how the money is not there.
Yep.
And if we have the money to go into Venezuela like this, then any of those veterans who are affected at all shouldn't have to worry about anything the rest of their lives. I just feel like, this thing in Minnesota and this thing in Venezuela makes me question our priorities as a nation. That's the concern I have.
And the big thing too I want to hit on too tonight is I want to see if this will show up here. Let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger. No. So it's not gonna be any bigger, but I can read it out for everybody. Is so this is the post we made today on Hellfish Haven. If you're reading this, you've likely seen the headlines: explosions, Caracas, a foreign leader captured, talk of military strikes, invasions, news cycles, spinning. It's got to keep playing it over and over again. Images all weekend long, chaos. If you can pull, right back, maybe the smell of the dust, you can almost taste it again. The familiar knot of vigilance in your gut, or deep, weary anger at the relentless cycle of conflict. Whether you're feeling it, whatever you're feeling, it's valid. Your reaction is not a sign of weakness. It's a testament of your experience. Today, we want to talk to you about, how to stand your ground when the world, feels a little less unsteady. How to respond, secure your area, make sure that you've got, people that you can lean on, people that you can talk to. You don't need to sit there and watch the news 24/7 for the next 3 days. You don't have to have this, fed into you and to be your everything. You don't have to go on social media and watch every, single, view of, every missile strike and, have to watch, what happened, how it happened, and then listen to the rhetoric on both sides of people, bitching about this and that instead of, like you said, talking about, if we have the money to do this and we have the money to do that, why aren't we able to help, a homeless vet? Why aren't we able to help, a veteran that's looking to, have him and his spouse be able to, get off of, social systems and be able to get their first house. We have these home loans and everything, but you still have to qualify. You still have to, make certain amounts. And a lot of people just think that once you get out and once you have, your veteran benefits, you're just set. And it's not the way it is. And the way the Washington Post really made things look over the last couple of months was that veterans are living the easy life, and going through comp and pen is no big deal, when in fact a lot of guys, for them to go through and to get the compensation and the disability rating, they have to go through multiple appointments. They have to go through sometimes years of back and forth of being approved, denied, and then appeals all the ways up to DC, and even reliving traumatic events, and getting paperwork that's guys that had the fire in St. Louis that lost everybody's paperwork, back in the day. And then you have to get buddy statements from people that, may not remember an event. And like, even when we were all in the service, you were told not to go to sick call. You were told not to, go see the doc because, you were letting, your fellow soldiers, your fellow Marines down because you were, you were being a profile manager, you were being a lingerer, and you just had to suck it up, take the Motrin, grab a canteen of water, and drive on. And, we just want to let folks know that that battle is not something that's easy. Even though it's been portrayed that way in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months now. Second thing you can do is ground yourself here and now. When your mind races to desert highway or crowded bazaar, bring it back. Use a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. Find 5 things you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 that you can hear, 2 that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Feel the floor underneath your boots. Control your breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and then you're here. You're safe. And that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing, I thought that was hooey. I didn't think it would work. And the first time I was in my doctor's office and actually did it, it's crazy because you're basically you're pushing other stuff out of your mind by putting more stuff into it. You can only hold so much in at once. And when you have the 5 things you can see, the 4 things that you can smell, the 3 things that you can touch, and like once you have all those things and you're doing it at once, you are pushing that anxiety out. You are pushing, the other things that are dealing with you. Make sure you've got a routine that you can fall back on. Don't stay up late watching the news. Don't sacrifice a meal. Don't sacrifice time with family and friends just because of what's going on right now. Connect with people that you serve with. If and if you're unable to do that, make sure that that there's plenty of resources out there. Whether it's 988, press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line, whether it's Vet for Warriors, whether it's the Mass Behavioral Health Line. There's so many resources that are out there listed on my site on Travis. If you just Google the sites, there's so many out there. There's people are here to be an ear to listen to you, and a voice to verify that what you're feeling isn't something out of the normal and strange for you to deal with. That this is what happens when you're reminded of an event, and everyone will see in time what this event will lead to.
I think I don't know what to think. I think, on one hand, you need to be involved. You need to understand what's going on. And again, we need to let our politicians know, what we expect. I agree with you. Like you said, this could turn into another Iraq very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of corruption, graft, fraud going on down there. And as you know, when you've been in that kind of culture for almost half a century now, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to really change that overnight. So we're kind of bound to this thing, whether we like it or not. And again, that's looking at it kind of through taking the rose-colored glasses off. But again, put the rose-colored glasses back on, and well, maybe the investment from oil companies and the money going to the people, and it managed, in a way that benefits the people of Venezuela, could be a great success story for capitalism. I don't know, and I'm not going to try to sit here and tell you that I have the answers. I am not. I'm simply going to say that what I heard from our president today is he had a chance to take this guy out, and he did. No American lives were lost. Fantastic. Strikes were done to minimize collateral damage to Venezuelans. That is absolutely must happen, right? Because, Mike, in Iraq and Afghanistan, when we bombed entire cities to oblivion and, just made the problem worse. So it's really going to come around the kind of government that comes up for Venezuela, and if the Venezuelans themselves are committed to changing things. And it seems like a lot of them are, like the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize winner, championed for this. And I hope that her work is honored in this next, way of going forward. So, and then just I hate to keep beating this to a pulp, but, again, my main beef with this is we have so many problems here. Did we just open up a can of problems down south that now we really are, going to be expending resources to handle when we have problems here? So too early to say anything or opine on anything. There's not a lot of information out on this, but it's to me, I'm very much wait and see right now.
Yep. And again, that's the hardest part is is the unknown, is the the like I said, the fact for me is this is all too familiar. This is the we oust somebody, there's no real plan, and then we've got the military stuck someplace for however long, keeping peace, keeping stability, while an insurgency grows. Well, a guerrilla force fights against us, and then you get foreign fighters that come in from other countries that say, hey, we were never going to get the chance to fight, the U.S., in the U.S., but, maybe down here in Venezuela, you've got, guerrillas, from other South American countries that don't like us for whatever reasons, that now see the chance to come in, have their fight to us.
That's pretty much it, man. All wow, all very new right now. All very kind of murky. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, the best is definitely letting let folks know that just take it day by day, take it with a grain of salt, and let's let's keep the pressure on those that are in charge to make sure that they don't just say, all right, we got rid of the guy, now we can rest on our laurels and get through. Let's make sure that we hold people to the fire here and say, hey, you pulled the trigger on this one, make sure you follow through, get it done, get new leadership in there, and get our boys and girls back home, so that way we don't have to suffer any loss of life or any any soldiers, Marines, sailors that are wounded due to a conflict that hopefully it is just in and out. And then maybe he's talking about how they use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for panic attack, and that's awesome to hear that it works good. Panic attacks are tough because it feels like you're having a heart attack. It's your whole body is just in such pain, and you just want to be able to prevent that from happening. And it's just big to make sure that folks have the resources that they need and have the information out there to be able to prevent something from happening before it gets there. A big thing with the post-traumatic growth and the thing that you and I have been talking about for the last 2 years is why are we waiting until somebody gets to the point where they're at rock bottom before we can help them? Why do we have to wait till somebody's homeless and sleeping on the street before we can provide them shelter? Why can't we do that when they're 90 days out or 30 days out from having a place to live? Why do we have to wait till they actually hit the street?
Yep.
And then that's another thing too that I think that this also throws up in the air is, does this now empower Russia to go more at Ukraine? Does this empower China to go into Taiwan and take their leadership and say the U.S. just did it, why can't we?
Well, again, I'm gonna find it. There is. Hang on a second. Charges against.
How do you spell it? MAU? I'm gonna pull up an NPR article. This is what are the charges. New indictment unsealed in federal court, New York, charged with narco terrorism, conspiracy, cocaine, importation, conspiracy, weapon charges.
Right. That's the thing. There's the coke. I mean, he didn't even try to hide it, Mike. I mean, cocaine trafficking, fentanyl trafficking.
This is international drug trafficking since 1999, including Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, Zertas, Colombian narco groups, Trinidad. Talks about the political and the military getting rich while taking from the rest of the countrymen.
And these weren't just done yesterday. These were done back in 2020. So this has been brewing for a while. March
2020.
People, unfortunately, just forget,
It says the bounty for his arrest was up to $50 million.
Yeah.
And the international courts have been investigating the Venezuelan government for torture, sexual violence, and arbitrary detentions. So they're not, saints in this. It's definitely not that at all.
And there's the thing. I mean, on one hand, I get it. I mean, you have a bad actor who's been bad for quite some time,
Mm-hmm.
but also I question the timing, the wisdom. And if you don't have the Venezuelan people on board with you, enough of them to make this stick, then you've just, chained us to a thing that's never going to be a fire that's never going to go out.
And then it posted in the chat the 2020 Justice Department link. Just to click I'm not a robot to see. Yeah, it shows for 20 years what he's been doing. Him and 4 other people participating in narco-terrorism. Leaders and managers of the cartels. Department of State estimated that 250 or more tons of cocaine were transiting Venezuela per year. They're using the Venezuelan coastline as a go-fast vessels, fishing boats, container ships. Yeah, so that site will show you. That's the Department of Justice's webpage that has all the. And I don't know what this what that other person's name is that keeps saying hello, but hello. And besides that, things in Mass seem to be going well. A little bit of snow. Emily was really psyched about that. Anytime there's snow, she gets all excited to go out there and put her footprints out there, and then she was really hoping that'd be enough to make a snowman, but we only got maybe 2.5, 3 inches of snow, and then by the time she gets out there to play with it, and half of it's gone from the wind.
It's supposed to snow tomorrow.
Is it gonna be snow tomorrow too?
Like in the morning, it's supposed to either be a dusting or a couple inches.
And then the Patriots play tomorrow.
Well, they do?
I believe so. We've got I think one more, and then it's just crazy to see like how that team went from what were they 4 wins last year?
Yeah.
To 13. That's just absolutely incredible.
It's going to be a good turnaround for you guys.
Yeah. So maybe said it's supposed to snow all weekend.
We will see.
And I didn't get to check out this week's Oscar Mike Radio. Who did you have on this week?
Who did I have on this week? Well, it was me. Yeah, I came on and kind of did a New Year's, resolution thing, and realizing, we're next week is 475. We are 25 weeks, about 6 months away from being 10 years old, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens. So, all good stuff.
Thank you kindly. I'm glad to have you folks out there, watching and checking in with us, making us an international show. And it is like, a lot of the things that, I'm putting together this month and, trying to share, isn't just for, isn't for vets, with the post-traumatic growth. It's, anybody that suffered a traumatic experience can turn the negative into a positive, I've got, a resource guide here, with different, organizations, different apps, and different things that are out there that folks can use. That's on the Hellfish Haven website. And then also a 7-day journaling guide to get people into being able to write down what they're going through and ways to to wake up, start the day, and and really change the mindset, and get you going forward. New Year's is a good time to make that change and go forward with different things. And I feel like if we can provide people with the resources, they'll be more apt to to push through and to do it versus how easy it is to wake up in the morning and go, I'm not going to go to the gym.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for jumping on tonight with me, Travis. I appreciate you.
Hey,
And,
absolutely. I think a lot needs to be watched very carefully. Accountability needs to happen, and we have got to make sure our voice is heard. So I think this is important. We're resilient. We are war. Thank you for checking us out tonight.
Absolutely. And we'll see you guys next week on our normal Thursday nights. Have a good night, folks. Thank you, guys.